All right. So we've started making this a monthly meeting, which we're going to take off December, but this is the league's voter skills training, and really think that it's something that every month you can think of something that you really need to be focusing on, but also some things that maybe we've never really thought about before that make a difference in what we're trying to do when we're working with people on voter education. And so this month, we set this agenda a couple of months ago to really stop and look at the process for how the electoral college works and what Alabama's role is. And after the January 6th insurrection, we had there was a bipartisan bill that was passed called the Electoral Count Reform Act. And so what that did was to make it a lot harder for someone like what was, the attempt that was made on January 6th to overturn the votes that, the people across the country had made. There's a process in place, for good or bad. The Electoral College laid out the process for how a president gets selected. And so the Reform Act was really trying to formalize some of the federal level requirements. And the good news, I'll tell you the end story first, is that Alabama was compliant with this law. So it is, we actually, what I'm going to show you is just the process that Alabama uses to meet the intent and the letter of the law. And so I think it's good for us to understand it. And right now we're going through that. We're seeing that process play out in front of us. So with that said, I'm going to show you the charts that I've created. I'm not going to read my charts because that's too much, but I will send them out after this meeting's over so that you can, look at them at your leisure. All right, just one moment. Okay. And if you see something that, if you have questions about, I'll stop at once we get to, halfway through and just see if there's anything people have questions about. But then I'll get through and then I'm going to hand it off to Roger, who will talk about the future. And so looking at the Alabama presidential canvassing, it's the certification process for selecting the United States president in our Alabama process. So the electoral votes that are allocated to a state are determined by the census. And so you have 2 senators, we have 7 congressional representatives. So that's 2 plus 7 gives us 9 electoral votes. And that's why when you hear electoral votes, that's how it's determined, is based on the population of the state. Under the 23rd Amendment, District of Columbia was also received 3 electors, and they're treated like a state for the purposes of the Electoral College. And every state is able to determine how to appoint its electors. However, with the law is that they have to decide that before the election. And so what that does is it means that you can't come up and not like the results of the election and then change your laws after the election on how you pick your electors. And that is why they ran into such problems, with all these, false slates of electors back in, 2021. So going to the next slide. This right now I pulled this from the National Archives. This is what the Alabama laws related to the electors, the political parties, which they're talking about Democrats and Republicans. Somebody is coming in, Judy. So the political parties select the presidential election, the electors, and the parties certify the names of the electors to the Secretary of State, and they have to include a statement made by each elector agreeing that they will cast their electoral vote for the candidate nominated by the party, and that's the president and vice president. And so then the counties, after the election, within 5 days after the election, they have to canvass the results and pass that to the Secretary of State. And then within 15 days of receiving the county results, the governor must certify the results and notify the electors that they're going to have to come together in December and actually pick the president and the vice president of the United States. So the meeting of these electors takes place in the office of the Secretary of State on noon of the second Tuesday after. Well, let me back up. It takes place in December. I'm going to show you. This is what the law says: second Tuesday in December, or on such other dates as may be fixed by Congress. This year, the meeting of the electors is December 17th. It's not the second Tuesday. It's actually December the 17th. So just to give you a view of the process, thank you, Brian. But I've got a copy here of the canvassing from Limestone County. This is the cover sheet that goes on the canvass results for Limestone County. And then that's passed over to the state. And then the state, as of today, is the 18th. By the 25th of November, the Secretary of State has to complete the canvassing of all the results from November 5th. And you can see this is what the cover sheet for the canvassing results looks like from 2020. So the Electoral Count Reform Act, which was put in place in 2022 on a bipartisan basis, requires that the meeting of the electors takes place on the first Tuesday after the second Wednesday in December following the election, and that is December 17th this year. So what they will submit is a list of the electors, and that's basically the certificate of ascertainment, which is the group that's going to say with certainty who the electors selected, as president. And so I'll show you a copy of what that looks like in a minute. And would then be turned over. There's several copies that are made that all have to be signed by these guys, and then guys and girls, and then they would turn it over to the archives as well as several other government officials. This is what the certificate of the electors sign. You can see here on the far left that in 2020, Alabama, no surprise, went Republican, and they had all 9 votes for president and vice president. Do you see 9 and 9? In the middle, that's the state of Georgia. And so you can see who they went with a popular vote, and all of the states go with a popular vote. They had 16 electoral votes in Georgia based on their census results. And then on the second page, it had all the people who had signed as those 16 people. And then the state of Tennessee, you can see what theirs looks like. Every state, there's no real definition on what the form looks like. It just has to have certain information included in it. If you wanted to go in and look at every single electoral count since 1789, it's at this link. There is a placeholder for the 2024 results, which I'm going to stop here for just a second. I'm going to stop and share my screen so I can click on that. I want to just show you that. It's kind of neat. All right. So you see here, you can see are you guys seeing this?
Yes.
Okay. So then you can see every state has a list of their electoral votes. And then on December 17th, when they finish their certificate, then it gets received by the archives by December the 24th. And then they put all this data in there and then total it up. And that's what goes in the, that's what actually goes into the, let me see if I can get out of this. that is what would end up going into each one of these. If you look at 2020, they've got the list and they show the certificate for every, like there's the certificate again. So you can go back in and look at it. All right, let's see if I can close this without messing up. Okay. So then looking at the calendar, this is the federal calendar. So November 5th was election day, and they've got certain things that have to happen on those days. And then December 11th was the deadline for issuing and sending certificates of ascertainment to the electors. And then they have to do these other steps. And also they're going to send the certificates of ascertainment and send copies to these government officials and the electors. Alabama administrative calendar mirrors that. You can see when you look at the administrative calendar, which is on the Secretary of State's website, these are the dates. November 8th, when the county canvassing board must meet and transmit the results to the Secretary of State. And then the 25th, which is next week, the Secretary of State has to finish the canvassing of the statewide results. And this is when, for example, a congressional rep for a state or anyone with a statewide office, they would get notified by that date who had won. And then on the 27th is the last day for the governor, Secretary of State, and Attorney General to canvass and send. And then that's what would end up being sent to, it would be going to the electors. And then December 17th, the electors in each state meet. And so they're looking at that canvassing results that was completed on the 25th. And then they fill out that certificate. And that result, that certificate has to be received by no later than Christmas. And then this is just the corresponding Alabama calendar. And then you see the 3rd of January is when the archivist transfers the certificates to Congress. January 6th of this coming year is when they're going to do the count of the electoral votes. And then the inauguration is on the 20th of January. So that's very dry, but I think it's good for us to understand this stuff. So are there any questions on this? And we'll be sending these slides to you, and you can look at those links at the archives, and if you got any follow-up questions, then that would be, you can send us emails afterwards. Anyone else? Judy?
I wondered about the word canvas. When I initially heard that, I thought it meant something completely different, and then you see it all over the place. And I just don't know how. I know that you probably can't answer that, but it was just a curiosity to me.
Well, you know who I always look at to answer all my voting questions related to a precinct. Yeah. You got an answer, Brian? I don't know the answer to that.
I don't know. I think that's the word they use in the law, but where it came from, I don't know. It's the canvassing board's the one looking at the results, but I don't know why they use that word.
There are some words that we use in Alabama that to me are just really odd. That's not the oddest one, but it's definitely unusual. All right. So with all that being said, I'm going to hand this off to Roger to talk about what's coming up in 2025. We can't hear you if you're saying anything.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for attending the Zoom meeting. Please wait until the presentation is over to ask questions or write them down to be asked later during the presentation. In a previous presentation, we were talking about a voting plan. Today, since the general election is over, we'll talk about what we need to do for 2025. So what we're going to be talking about is what do I do after the 2024 election? What happens after the 2024 election? Election schedule and municipal elections and Alabama election cycle calendar. So what do we do after the election's over? Well, first of all, continue to check your voter information. I always recommend check it once a month. And here I put the link on there if you want to look at that. Check to see if your absentee ballot was received and accepted. Now, I don't know about anybody else, but we have some problems here in Madison as far as the ballots getting lost in the mail. And check your local election website to see how your voting precincts results in the election. And here's a link for that. You can click on any of your counties and it'll come up for you. Bookmark the Alabama Channel website so you can see the legislature in action, and you can always go back and say, well, what happened with IVF? What happened with the abortion? What happened to redistricting? And what's going on with the libraries right now? It's a good idea to keep track of that. And mark your calendars for the municipal elections. And beware of voter purges.
But for a preliminary injunction has been filed against Secretary of State Wes Allen to stop the removal of some Alabamians from the voter rolls. A federal judge ordered Alabama election officials to put the names of people recently removed back on the voter roll. But come November the 6th, Secretary of State Allen can start marking names off once again if they are deemed inactive. Months ago, Allen removed what he claimed to be more than 3,200 non-citizens from Alabama's voter roll. But DOJ officials claim this move violated the National Voting Rights Act. The law states voters cannot be removed less than 90 days to an election. Allen removed the voters 84 days before this election. Also new.
So what to do? Well, also with this purging, she said anybody who is inactive, he's going to start purging them off the rolls. And we've seen hundreds of those on different events. Sorry about that. What you should do, try and get involved with civic engagement. Get a group together and talk about your issues and how those issues pertain to you. And join the League of Women Voters. That's the website.
How do we make democracy work in Alabama? The League of Women Voters grows, empowers, and protects the vote. By registering voters in universities and community colleges, underserved high schools, churches, libraries, and food banks. By bringing candidates and government officials before the people to answer questions, share views, and exchange ideas. By observing governments, boards, and agencies at city, county, and state levels and reporting to the people to encourage open and transparent government. By educating citizens and ourselves about money in politics, voting process and procedures, and other complex public issues. And by fighting in the courts and the legislature to assure that voting is free, fair, and accessible. The League of Women Voters of Alabama and our local leagues in Birmingham, Tuscaloosa, Montgomery, East Alabama, Baldwin County, and Mobile invite you to join us as we continue to grow, empower, and protect the vote.
Okay, so the general election is over. So how do you find out what elections are going to happen in 2025? You can go to the Alabama Secretary of State's website and find a schedule for 2025. There's the link. So when you go there, this is what you'll see. Local elections or referendums. August 24th, that's already over. Starting March 4th, 2025, the city of Tuscaloosa is going to have a municipal election. Then August 5th, the city of Dothan will have a municipal election. And there's a list of all other municipalities that are going to be having elections on August 26, 2025. So in Tuscaloosa, since you're having yours on March 4th, your application for the absentee ballot should be available around the end of January. And there's a link there for Tuscaloosa I put on there. And when you go there, they're not exactly ready for anything yet. Well, hopefully they start pretty soon about doing that. And the following municipality will have elections on August 5th, 2025. Now that'll be Dothan. And then the municipalities will have elections on August 26th. We'll have Auburn, Besserman, Birmingham, Gadsden, Huntsville, Mobile, Montgomery, Mountain Brook, Scottsboro, and Talladega. So it's going to be a little bit busy there, part of 2025. When you scroll down that page, you also see these little links down here. And this one's called the Alabama Election Cycle Calendar. So when you click on that, you should get this. What this is all your different elections and the times and years of the elections. So come 2024, you're going to be looking for the president, vice president, U.S. representative. Oh, we did that. 2026, you're going to have most of the state offices are available for election. Then the odd numbers, then some of your criminal appeals judges, court of appeals judges. This is what you may want to do is maybe print this off and put it on the refrigerator, because there's a lot of information here. All the different years, how long the terms are. I'll give this, like I say, this would be pretty nice to have handy. Now, summary, we talked about what you should do after the 2024 elections, what happens after 24 elections, election schedule, and the Alabama election cycle calendar. And our next meeting will be on January 2025, on January 21st, for skip in December. And anybody have any questions?
Will we get a copy of your
Yes.
presentation too?
Yes.
What is the date of the January meeting?
January 21st.
21st.
We'll be talking about municipal elections, need early voting, what we can do, and expand the moral turpitudes list, voter rights restoration.
Yeah. So my thought was that during this meeting, we would talk about all the reasons why early voting is needed, but we would also introduce our effort to lobby, to advocate with the legislature to pass the early voting laws, as well as there's two other bills, which one of them is related to disability, absentee voting, and the other one's about absentee curing. All of these together are going to make Alabama a lot easier place to vote and still have election integrity. The third topic would be related to the expanded list of moral turpitudes, because back at the end of the last legislative cycle, right at the last week of the legislature, there was an amendment negotiated from the Secretary of State's office with the legislature to take a bill that was supposed to be just about election worker protection. And what they did is they have basically tripled the number of ways that you can lose your voting rights. And so we need to make sure that the message is getting out there as far as what that law means to all of us. And also, when you go out and you're meeting with people that you're helping, then we do have, we and other groups are available to help make sure that people who need to get their rights back understand that we can help them understand what it's going to take to get their rights back. So this is not going to be the training for someone who wants to get down and do all that analysis, but it would be a training that would be for anyone who's out there helping a voter. If you find someone that says, I can't vote, then the next step is to just in a very careful way, but respectful way, just to let people know that there are people who are there to help, but also the fact that you need to understand the law has recently changed. So, am I missing anything on that? Either one of those, I guess. we've got Brian, our VRR lead, on the line, but we've also got Kim. Kim Bailey is our Lobby Corps lead, and Roger is our voter training lead, and Julie Reese is our voter services state level lead. So we're all together basically trying to make sure that anything that we feel like you need to know, we're rolling it out so that in a way that hopefully helps everyone know what you need to know.
Does the House and the Senate both seat on the same day, get sworn in on January 3rd?
Well, they didn't have an election this year, so they're rolling. This is not an election year for them, or this past year was not. Are you talking about the State House?
I'm talking about national.
Well, I am not sure exactly what date it is that they get sworn in, but they do. That certificate that they need that in order to get in, to get seated. But I don't know the date when the House actually recognizes them. I do know that during the 2020, that was one of the things that, the people who'd been elected were able to come in and be part of. They couldn't certify their own results, obviously, but it was in that early part of January. But as far as the State House, and looking at what's going to happen in 2025, this is not an election year, so the session starts, I think it's, you guys correct me if I'm say this wrong, February 6th, right? Is that when the state, Kim, I know
I think it's the 4th.
The 4th?
February 4th. I think so.
Okay. So one of the things I'm really excited, because I feel like this year we stand a really good chance of getting an early voting bill passed. The only thing standing in our way is the Secretary of State. And he was very much opposed to having anything except Election Day being one day. And, but that's why we're asking for everybody to help us communicate with, starting in January, we're going to be sending out calls to action. We'll talk about it as part of this January 21st program. But we're going to need everybody helping us reach their legislators and talk to them about how important it is to open up to where people can have more than one day to vote. All right, I was trying to type out all the different leagues.
Kathy, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Can you speak a little bit to turnout, Alabama's dismal turnout?
Yeah. I think it was 58%. It was I guess we do need to kind of talk about the election that just happened, but the turnout in Alabama was the lowest that it's been since 1988, and that was 58%. The last time they had that was back in what was it, Dukakis, and who was running against him? I saw that. But anyway, 88. And so we've been seeing turnout be lower and lower and lower during city elections here in Huntsville. Recently, it was I want to say it was 7% turnout. And then before that, with several special elections, you had state senators who are making laws that affect our lives get elected. Back in January, the one that represents me got elected with like 2,300 votes. And that wasn't even a 10%. It was less than 10% of the vote. And when you have that few state senators and you can't get a good turnout, that is the thing that's going to really make us have a hard time of ever creating positive change in Alabama if we can't get the voter turnout up. And I see Janine has her hand up, and Austin next after her. Janine?
Yes. I wonder why every poll manager said there was record turnout, and yet we're told we have a low turnout. And that happened in so many states where they said they had absolute record turnout. And I know for sure the counties where, the polls in Baldwin County where I went to count the vote, they said it was like 1,500 more voters came and cast ballots than ever before. So I have a question about why the math doesn't add up.
So I don't know the answer to that. We do have the data, that's preliminary election night data, which substantiates what he's saying. And I don't know an answer to that, except that I will tell you that the state league was part of the election protection oversight. We were helping to resolve the issues on the 186R vote, and there were also just an unbelievable number of hardware problems at the different polling places. And so that to me makes long lines when you have it where there's only one of tabulators working. You have a lot of delays based on that, but I don't know the answer to that, Janine.
We may have had higher turnout in lower Alabama because of the redistricted congressional seat. We may have had higher turnout here than the rest of the state.
I will show you that here in just a second. I did look at that. Austin, you're next.
Yes, I was wondering, someone answered my question for Madison County about who designates the polling sites. Because when I was poll monitoring on election day, it was very disturbing to see that a polling site was a sheriff's office training facility and that they were training and shooting firearms at that facility. So I would just like to know if you know who does that for each county, how you find out that information, because also I think that makes a good case for early voting and absentee voting too, if they don't change polling sites, that people have that option.
Yeah. So are you saying that they were practicing shooting on the day of the election?
They absolutely were. There were like
Lord.
60 police officers in uniform with their shooting gear. I reported it to the Legal Defense Fund. I don't know what happened. I need to follow up with them. But if someone is afraid of firearms, are not comfortable with them, or the law enforcement, for whatever reason, that's very problematic. And there were many. I passed so many churches. There could have been a church that people could go on for that polling site. So,
well, I do know that Frank Barger, the probate judge here, is the one that sets those. But I'm just really that's just poor. I can't imagine that anyone would think that was a good idea.
Well, it's intimidation.
Yeah, that's the thing is you got to. Thank you for bringing that up, Austin. I will talk to some folks because I did. What's the name of that polling place?
It's in Tuscaloosa County, so I think it was the Tuscaloosa County Sheriff's Office training facility.
Oh, okay. It wasn't in Madison County. That's not Frank Barger. I thought you
No,
were
it was in Tuscaloosa County. I was stationed in Tuscaloosa County.
So
I think either the county commission or, when I was reading some information about that, it said the county commissions determine polling locations, which I was surprised about.
Yeah.
But the probate judge is the head of the county commission.
Yeah, I just posted a video clip about Frank Barger announcing he's changing polling locations.
Yeah, I think the county commissions have to approve it because he doesn't have the authority to be picking stuff like that. But I think they take his recommendations. The probate judge works with the county commissions. So Janine, you next, and then I'm going to show a slide of some analysis for CD2.
I just want to give an example. At the Three Circle Church in Fairhope, the poll manager told me at 6:45 that there were more than 6,500 people that came in and cast a ballot. Yet, once they ran the totals from the machines, and they had 3 machines, they don't concern themselves with the totals and whether that matches the amount of ballots cast. The totals for the presidential election were only 5,400. That's a difference of more than 1,000 votes of ballots. And I know some people said I didn't vote for president at all because I didn't like either candidate, but not that many at that poll. I know that poll very well because I've been counting the vote there for many years. And the split was 5-1 Republican versus it's normally 2-1 or 3-1 at the most. Like in midterms, it'll be that way. So I'm just saying, I think there was something squirrely.
Well, I appreciate your sharing that. I'm pulling up. I mean, we can get the data by polling place. I'm just looking.
Hey, Kathy?
Yes.
I can't figure out on my raised hands disappear, but back to the question about the numbers, and I was frantically looking, but Limestone County, and we're the fastest growing county, but our poll worker training, I think they said since 2004 to this year, we have doubled the number of voters. So that kind of explains why, if you're looking at numbers of voters, yeah, this was a record year, but if you're looking at percentage turnout, it was not. And I've heard both here that the probate judges talked about, well, we had the record number of voters, but the turnout was down from even 2020. So.
Yeah, and I want to show you guys the CD2 analysis that yeah, I'll just show you that I'm an absolute, I get down into the mud trying to look at stuff. Just a second. Okay. So this is CD2. I'm gonna freeze this. If I can figure out how to move this guy. View, freeze, column. All right. So when you look at this, we'll go to the general election, and this is CD2. So I know you asked a question about the voter turnout being so high because of the election. And when you look, shoot, I apologize. I don't know why that came back up. This is all right. So this is looking at the counties that are in CD2, and you see Barber, Bullock, Butler, Clark, Conecuh, Crenshaw, Macon, Mobile, Monroe, Montgomery, Pike, Russell, and Washington counties. And these are the total number of people registered as of mid-October in those counties. So that this right here totals a total population of 683,000 people. When you start looking, and this was the general election this year, and you see the turnout, and you say for those people who are identified, I would say Democrat, 157,092. There are two counties, Clark and Mobile County, that are split. And so those votes accounted for 20,000. And then GOP turnout, 130,847 for the people in CD2. And then outside of CD2, there were 58,000. So if you look at the total percent turnout by county, you ended up with 53.8% voter turnout in CD2. But that's still because of the fact that this district was drawn in a way that allowed African Americans to the possibility of selecting the candidate of their choice. You had, I think it was 43% African Americans. Even with this low turnout, they were able to pick the candidate of their choice, which, that just shows you the difference between, now you look over here at I'm gonna move this over here to show you this is 2020. And can you see how many different congressional districts were splitting up this area of the state was divided amongst CD 1, 2, 3, and 7. And so when you start looking at the overall voter turnout, and there were 675,000 voters, they ended up with a higher turnout, 57.4%. But the fact was that because the African American vote had been cracked in so many different ways, they were not able to elect the candidate of their choice. And I just find that kind of remarkable, because this is such a great example of why it was so important for this map to be created, to give African Americans an opportunity to elect the candidate of their choice. And because you look at the overall turnout, 57.4, that's only 4 points, less than 4 points difference, but there were several different. It was like CD1, CD2, CD3, and CD7. CD7 is Terry Sewell's, so they had gone into Clark County and Montgomery County on these two for Terry Sewell, and literally went in there and carved out the African American vote out of Montgomery County and put it into CD7. They had gotten up to 70-something% Black in CD7 by surgically pulling out the African Americans and putting them into this one safe district. But when the state of Alabama was forced to go in and accept this map that was drawn by the court, then that's why right now you've got 2 African American congressional representatives, is because of the redistricting. And I just think it's great. I mean, it's really good news. But it's also, I think everybody needs to pay attention also to the courts, because the state of Alabama has put everything in place to go back to court to try to get this map redrawn again. And this is not a done deal. Anyway, so Rhoda, I thought that was I'm glad you mentioned that, because it just shows you also, when you got a low voter turnout, every vote matters. It's like every vote matters. The league, or one of our biggest projects this year was to get 37,000 postcards sent to rural CD2 to get them to, basically to get their voting plan in place. And it turned out, when you looked at those numbers, the rural counties brought in 1/3 of the vote. And so that's actually kind of also remarkable, because these counties have gone for so long not having anyone paying attention to them. And now they've got their own representative. Judy?
When I first heard the turnout numbers were a little bit less than what they were in 2020, my initial reaction was our get out the vote efforts weren't successful. But then I realized maybe they were. It might have been a lot worse had we not dug in and done the things that they did.
Well, and you're right, because, even like with the Maryland land, and I forgot who was running against her, but that campaign, it was down to going and pulling people. I was not involved. League can't be involved in this kind of stuff, but you hear things, and it was down to people going in to the door, people's door, and saying, you need to get to the polls today. And so, it's in low voter turnout elections, which is what we've got in Alabama, every vote that's turned out makes a huge difference to the outcome.
We just need some candidates.
Well, we need a functioning 2-party system. And so that's the thing. It's really about having a 2-party system that is really functioning, at least 2 parties. But anyway, so which spreadsheet, Austin, are you talking about? I'm not sure.
The one that you just showed us of the turnout rates?
No, that was something I pulled together based on just pulling the data. I pulled the data off of the election results, which I can drop the link to the election results here, just so you can look at it. But I did basically trying to pull all these demographic data.
Oh, okay. Oh, that was a good looking sheet. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Like I said, I'm kind of a nerd, but not as big a nerd as some of my buds. I think some of us spend way too much time playing with data. All right, here you go. This is the results that came out at election night. And on the 25th, we're going to see all the final canvassing results with everything rolled together, certified, that shows the final numbers. One of the things we're looking at, I'll just tell you guys also, we're looking to understand the absentee voting and how many applications were sent out, how many were returned, how many were rejected, how many didn't ever get counted. And this is back to what Roger was talking about a couple of months ago. You know, if there is a problem on your affidavit envelope, it gets set aside, it never gets counted. And we want to get some actual data on that so that we can use it to help show people that this system has got a lot of flaws. All right, well, so that's all we had. And Roger, thank you. I appreciate your coming in and doing these trainings for folks.
Thank you.
All right, we'll talk to everybody later.